Hello and welcome to Intro to ESP Decoy Systems. Today I'm going to be talking about some of my work that I've done. It's all my own, not that of my employer. And if you want to reach out to me after the talk today, my name is Joshua Schroeder. You can find me on Twitter at JoshInGeneral, or you can send me an email at joshingeneral@gmail.com. So this is my second time presenting at the Wireless CTF. I've competed for several years, normally under the name JackTenna, the Team JackTenna, and now as an individual contributor to the team What the Freak. I'm also the published author of Meeting People via Wi-Fi and Bluetooth, a tool that I wrote, and some techniques that I put together as far as how to track people. A lot of it that I learned here at the Wireless CTF. Much of my current research, though, these days involves smart home and cloud solutions, building scripts and taking our Reno house and adding switches, sensors, and cameras to it in order to be able to make it more integrated and to be able to save energy. In the past, I've been a Unix admin. I've done incident response, and I've also been a red team and penetration tester. Other hobbies including playing with my dog, traveling with my wife, and renovating our house. So today, the technical portion of this talk is going to be covering ESP chips, in particular the ESP8266. We will show how to use these in decoy devices and how to hide them in order to make APs and essentially tracking devices that you can deploy when competing in the Wireless CTF, or if you're doing red team and penetration testing engagements and want to keep it from whatever victims you're going after. So we're going to talk a little bit about the programming that I use for the Arduino. It's really easy to get set up. They have a lot of examples. And we're going to show how to use a hotspot right on the chip and couple that together with a fake web server for tricking teams into submitting false flags for the Wireless CTF. So where we kind of got our first experience with this was competing in the Wireless CTF hide and seek challenge. So the hide and seek challenge, if you haven't done it, is basically small access points around the conference center or wherever they're setting up the competition. And you have to use antennas, normally stubby and directional antennas, in order to find the device in the AP. Sometimes you can see the device, other times you can't. It might be in a hotel room, it might be in an office, and you just have to basically point out where it's at. The problem we were having is we kept finding flags, but they weren't in the places where the organizers had set them up. So we'd find a flag that said flag 1, and we'd say, hey, it's over in room 207. And they'd be like, that's not where we set it up. So we thought we were going crazy, and it was super frustrating. And we knew that other teams could create decoys, but we just couldn't see them. They weren't any kind of like Aruba gear that was hanging on the wall. It wasn't a Netgear hidden underneath a desk. And so we didn't really know what was going on. So at the end of every competition with the Wireless CTF, there's always a debrief. And back in 2016, I believe it was, one of the teams mentioned that they were using ESP8266 chips as decoy APs. Now, I had never used one of these before, and they are actually pretty new on the market. So I started researching them. I asked the team a little bit, but they didn't elaborate too much on how they did it. So a lot of the research was stuff I had to do on my own. So what is the ESP chip? It's done by a company called Express Systems out of Shanghai. And they started making these chips and getting traction of distributing them back in 2015 to 2016, as seen here in this technical construction file. And I've also provided resources down at the bottom, and I'll be giving these slides over to the organizers so that you guys can have them as well for your notes and research to expand on. So they kind of started out in 2008, and we're basically in kind of research startup mode until around, I'd say 2010, 2013, when they released their first chip, the ESP-8089. Now, the advantage with that one is that it had a 2.4 gigahertz wireless antenna in it, and it was designed for tablets and set-top boxes, so TVs and maybe like small Amazon Fire sort of tablets. So still a really cool thing, but nothing that we were necessarily seeing on the wireless scene at that time, or at least I wasn't. So around 2014, they launched the ESP8266 EX edition, which is what we're going to be playing with today, or a variation of that. So that one is a low energy, high integrated Wi-Fi solution that requires a minimum of 7 exterior components. And the nice thing about this is you can use a small USB block like this and get about, I'd say, anywhere from 8 to 12 hours with our testing, just running off of that battery pack. Later on, they actually integrated Bluetooth and started developing software kits that would allow for building IoT devices on top of the chip itself. 2017, they're actually integrating with Apple, and they built a SDK kit for that. Alexa comes onto the scene with an SDK kit in 2018, I believe designed by the company ePressif. And then finally, in this year, they've integrated some more things, and then back in 2019, Azure had certified them as a Microsoft plug-and-play. So you could actually take an IoT device and have it integrate with Azure in things like the integrated AD cloud. So that would allow you to have card access via lock systems on an integrated chip that would then integrate with your AD, so you could quickly add and delete users from your physical systems. So like I mentioned before, the ESP is an Arduino chip, and it's found in many IoT devices. The advantage is that it's lightweight and has a great code base. If you go into the Arduino IDE, which we'll show a little bit later, they've got tons of example code to get you up and running without you having to try to figure out which libraries you need or how to put the code together. And from there, you can build your own applications, build out APIs, and hit the ground really running. Some of you have probably played with the Raspberry Pis. Raspberry Pis also has a very small form factor one called the Raspberry Pi Zero that they came out with a few years ago. It's about half the power of that. During my research, I found that it takes 231 milliwatts, where the Raspberry Pi is at 550. So basically, it's going to last longer on whatever power source you give it. It's also slightly smaller, which makes for easier hiding in our particular application. And unlike the Pi, though, it does not have a full CLI or interactive interface. So you basically load the firmware to the chip, and then if you want to have it do things, it's going to run those as kind of like a static code right from the chip. So they've actually created a few different versions of the ESP chip. So there was the 8266 that came out originally. Then they came out with a 32 series, which they expanded out to a 32S series. And finally, I believe it was this or last year, they came up with the 32C series. So the cool thing about that is that means that they're building on it, and new features and better integrations will be coming out in the future. So many IoT devices use this as a core chip. I've personally seen this in door lock systems. I've seen it used in smart plugs. And one of the interesting things that I've researched with that is that if the encryption isn't applied correctly, using a public-private key or APIs from a card reader, you can actually unsolder the chip and put it on a breadboard, and you can read the passwords, Wi-Fi keys, any other private keys, and even configuration settings that are stored on the chip. So that's something to be concerned with if you're worried about this being found behind enemy lines. So let's talk a little about the deployment that we came up with for DEF CON. So I believe it was 2 years ago, we decided to go ahead and attempt to build this as part of our build out flyaway kit. So I bought 4 of these ESP8266 from Amazon for a little under $20, and I was hoping to be able to hide them in a smoke detector. My thought was that I could take the smoke detector, stick it on the ceiling, and it wouldn't be caught in the bug sweeps that they do at the end of the night. So moving on with kind of the back-end code, I decided to use the Wi-Fi access point example code, which you can see here. If you go to File, Examples, ESP8266 Wi-Fi, and then Wi-Fi access point, it will give you some sample code, and all you have to do is go through and modify the different SSID, the password, and the HTML of the web server that you're wanting to run. So I put in WCTF04, a password that was in the password list, so it would be crackable. So teams would think that it was authentic and part of the game. And then I also provided a flag on there that was just a fake flag that they would submit and get frustrated with putting in but not getting points for. In previous years, there had been negative points, but they've done away with that in recent years. So this is what it looks like once it's up and running. You'll see there's a WCTF. It creates a router IP address, and then the first device to join will get a .2. Much like the other challenges that are in the CTF, you do a scan on port 80, and you'll find the web server. And as you can see here, you have Make My Day as the flag that needs to be entered. So one of the problems with the smoke detector that I found, there was not enough room to put the battery pack, the Arduino, and the cable that was needed to be able to charge everything right inside the smoke detector and make it still look like a real smoke detector. There were also issues with mounting on the ceiling. I tried to use like the 3M sticks and push it on there, and it just ended up being too heavy. One other problem we found too, which isn't that big of a deal, but it only lasted for 8 to 12 hours. So the battery pack would eventually die, and our decoy would go offline. Another problem we found too is with one of the challenges that needs to be completed overnight, or has a better ability of being completed overnight, we needed a CLI, something with the interface of a basic device like a Raspberry Pi. And this is for the one where you connect to it. It allows you to connect to a web server, and then as soon as you connect to the web server, capture the key, enter the key, the Wi-Fi goes down for 60 seconds, and it's basically a race condition for the next team to get in and get a flag and complete it. And you do that every 60 seconds over the course of the entire CTF, and you get points. So that was one of the challenges that we were trying to do with hiding these overnight, because there'd be less people in the room. Therefore, we wouldn't have as much of a competition for that race condition. And we found a little difficulty with doing it with the Arduino. However, the Raspberry Pi and the same concept worked fairly well. So since the smoke detector didn't work, I ended up buying a magnet at the gift shop, getting some electrical tape that I brought with me, and I stuffed the Arduino in an anti-static bag and stuck it under tables where teams were competing. So I'd go over, talk to the team, and carefully while I was talking to them and they were distracted, I would slide the Arduino underneath their table and that would be really close and hopefully allow them to connect quickly and set up a nice decoy. The other thing that we did too, kind of on a side note, is we saw that there was a 2-gang patch panel that was in the wall, and so we unscrewed that and put one inside of there, and we also put one of the Raspberry Pis in there with a battery pack to go overnight and capture those race condition flags. So that worked pretty well, and it wasn't found during the course of the bug sweep. So that might be something that the organizers want to look for next time. So unfortunately, we aren't able to go in person this year, but we have created some neat ideas for deployment the next time we go out. And using a power outlet and a lamp and plug options, we've kind of worked through some ideas in order to hide these even better. And so that's what we're going to show today. So for the power outlet, I went to Home Depot and I got one of the USB outlets that has 2 ports for USB and 2 ports for power. It goes into the wall, and it provides a nice setup for charging your phone or a tablet without having to have one of the power blocks. So in order to get everything to fit in there, I bought a small USB micro chip connector, and I also bought some of the cables in order to have the right thickness in order to hook everything up. So the Arduino almost fits inside, but it needs some modifications. So for the ones that I had, there was a whole bunch of pins on either side of the ESP8266, so I had to unsolder those. I also had to trim the USB connector, and I had to shave a little bit of the plastic inside the power outlet. Nothing that would affect it or cause a fire. So we carefully unsoldered the leads on the USB outlet, the leads on the Arduino, and then we connected those leads from the micro mini adapter that you see here in the bottom image on the left to the USB ports in the actual outlet itself. We then used a bead of silicone to protect the leads from touching any of the metal inside, and we also used rubber gloves since we would be changing the outlet while it was hot in order to protect ourselves from getting shocked. So here's me taking all the pins off. Just basically have to heat it up, solder gets wet, and it turns to a liquid, and you're able to pull them off with some pliers. And then I trimmed the little adapter for the micro USB plug-in. And the reason I did that instead of just soldering it directly to the board was I wanted to be able to unplug it and plug it back into my laptop to be able to make code edits. So that was a quick and easy way that I could basically do that without having to unsolder and resolder every single time. And then finally I trimmed some of the plastic around where the screws went in. Still kept the integrity of the box, but it just allowed it to lay flat in there. And then over on the right-hand side here, we have the leads being soldered directly to the actual USB leads on the outlet itself. So once everything's set up, we noticed that there was a little bit of a gap just getting everything to fit together. But in most electrical applications I've learned, and this is from working with an electrician that did some work in our house, is the proper way to do an electrical outlet installation is you wrap electrical tape around it. That way when someone takes the outlet out and has to do any work on it, they're not getting shocked if the power for some reason isn't off. The other cool thing about this is because we soldered it to the USB ports and didn't remove them, both of them still work. So you can see here it's charging my phone while it's also charging the Arduino, and it's connected to this WCTF04. The great thing about this is it's low risk of detection because it's going to be in the wall. People don't change these outlets, especially nice outlets like these, very often. And as long as the house or conference center is charging power to these outlets, you're going to have a feed for your Arduino as well. So other things that we tried to is a little bit quicker install. The thought is that with the plug, you're going to have to do that in a closet or maybe a bathroom, somewhere that you're going to be able to have probably 15 minutes to be able to unscrew the plug that was there, screw it back in, and you're going to have a risk of someone seeing you do that and be like, hey, what are you doing? So we wanted to do something that was a lot quicker, and so we thought about an inline plug. So what we did is we got basically plug adapters for lights that go in the ceiling. So if you have a light bulb that goes in the ceiling, you can plug it in and screw it into this, and then you'll be able to plug the power block into that, and then that will charge the Arduino. So you can see here, the light sticks out a little bit, so there might be some modifications in the future that we want to do. But if it's high on the ceiling, you're not going to see the little plug that's coming off of it. So it's a faster install, but it's not as well hidden. And once again, if you have LED lights, you're not going to be changing those that often, and it could even take years for someone to find this. So future work, I still do want to work on the smoke detector. I want to work on one that has a power line plug-in. Here, where I live in Maryland, there have a lot of requirements that you have to have on every single level of an office or home a plug-in power smoke detector. So if I can get that in line with the Arduino, then that would be something that would be quick and easy. You just unplug it and plug the decoy in, making sure that the smoke detector still works. Don't want to have a safety hazard. And then I want to add some options for an SD card for the Arduino, so that way when people are interacting with the website, there's weblogs. I have the ability to capture creds in a red teaming or penetration testing environment where I set up a fake login. And that would allow me to do a remote Wi-Fi offload by drive-by. So in other words, I'd be able to come in with my laptop, connect to the network, access the SD card, wipe out the credentials after I've collected them, and then go on my way. Other things I've considered is exit signs, CO2 or radon detectors. Those are generally a lot larger than the smoke detector, and so they will have a lot more room in order for me to be able to put a battery pack or connect to the AC power in there. And they're also a safety item too, so no one's going to remove them. And then finally, I want to see if I could do a 6-port plug that extends a regular outlet from 1 or 2 ports to 6, and that would just be a simple plug-in. Once again, someone could remove that very easily, but it only takes a matter of seconds in order to plug that decoy in. So I want to have a big thank you for the Wireless CTF or RF Village, and especially Rick and Wasabi for pushing me to submit this year. If you guys have any questions or want to work on some of these prototypes with me, feel free to reach out. This is my contact information. Once again, Twitter, JoshInGeneral, and email, joshingeneral@gmail.com. Thanks again. Have a good one.